Thank you very much. My connection is not very stable. I hope everything will work well. First of all, I sincerely thank Olivier Leclerc, Anouk Barberousse, Jérôme Michelon, and Stéphane Ruffy for the invitation and the organization of this workshop, which brings me a lot of new ideas and allows me to think about these issues from other angles. I'm not a member of the Swiss anti-PowerPoint part, but I needn't PowerPoint for this presentation. After Agnès Robin's examination of the legal aspects of the reproducibility of results in academic research, I will focus on the complementary issue, I think, that of the reproducibility of results from so-called regulatory sciences, defined by Sheila Jasanoff as the hybrid activities that combines scientific evidence and reasoning with strong dose of social and political judgment. So, more specifically, Olivier Leclerc said it, thank you. I have been interested in toxicological, ecotoxicological, and clinical studies on various products, GMOs, human and veterinary drugs, more recently, chemical substances, and food supplements, with a view to their marketing. And when I look closely at these regulations, I noticed something strange. The data relating to these health and environmental risk assessments on which the public authorities base their decisions to authorize or refuse a product on market are accessible in some areas and confidential in others, which is an obstacle to reproducibility. That's why it's interesting. What explains such a distortion? And in areas where data is not accessible, how can fraud be detected? This is very interesting. This is a central problem because economic warfare can lead players to defraud. For example, to keep a product on the market. And cases have been detected as recently as 2016 following investigations by the Food and Drug Administration in the United States of America. The French Agency for the Safety of Health Products also admits, and I quote, that there is some doubt at the reliability of the data submitted to the competent national authorities. So, however, decisions to authorize or refuse a product on the market or even to withdraw it are made on the basis of this data, and the stakes are therefore colossal. So, but I said it, not all areas are concerned. The most recent regulations, for example, those concerning additives, enzymes, and flavorings in 2008, GMOs since 2013, and veterinary drugs since 2019, provide for access by the authorities and all public to raw study data. So we could discuss about what is raw data, but the regulation defined it, which suggests that transparency is gaining ground. Optimistically, this can therefore be seen as a step forward from the point of view of the reproducibility crisis. But when I studied the issue of GMOs, especially, which was one of the field of study of my thesis, the reality appeared a little more complex to me. I wanted to understand why and how data from studies had become available in this area, which allowed me to observe that removing an obstacle to reproducibility in regulatory science does not mechanically lead to greater public confidence. If transparency makes it possible to uncover frauds, for example, Or conversely, if data are used by companies to try to discredit studies on competing products by reinterpreting the data, it's even the opposite that can happen. So my first part will therefore focus on the logical nature of the development of transparency in reaction to form of mistrust, while my second part will examine the risk of a return to form of mistrust despite transparency measures favorable to the reproducibility of studies, like a sort of backfire or flashback. Firstly, from mistrust to transparency, a logical evolution. Mistrust of regulatory science was particularly fueled by the so-called Seralini affair, named after the biologist who led the research team whose study was the starting point of a controversy that had important consequences from the point of view of transparency and, incidentally, reproducibility. Their study was intended to question the evaluation protocols for the marketing of GMO by asserting that while they allow for the evaluation of acute toxicity with 90-day studies, they say nothing about chronic toxicity. Although the study has been strongly contested for its lack of relevance, this is very important, it has nonetheless led to controversy over the limitations of the data contained in the marketing authorization files and a debate over access to raw data. Thus, this case has played an important role in removing a barrier to replication, which is why I will return to it. The market authorization of the GMO concerning dates back to 2004. To obtain it, the company at the origin of the application carried out toxicity studies in compliance with regulatory requirements, and therefore for a period of 90 days. 8 years later, an article presenting the result of a study on the long-term toxicity of herbicide and the genetic GMOs in question was published in the journal Food and Chemical Toxicology. And one of the peculiarities of the studies was its duration. While the toxicity of the GMO has been evaluated by the company applying for marketing authorization over a 90 days period in preparation for the marketing authorization application, the article reported on a 2-year evaluation period. According to its authors, the results led to the conclusion that the GMO was chronically toxic and therefore implied more generally that, I quote, long-term toxicity tests must be carried out to evaluate the health effects of consuming genetically modified foods. In order to pronounce on the quality of the study, and this is the crux, which was highly controversial, various agencies requested access to all of the data about the study. And this is logical. But this request led to an unexpected reaction with serious consequences for reproducibility. The research team of Seralini agreed to release its raw data on the condition that the agencies would in turn release the raw data from the evaluation carried out by the companies, the data contained in the marketing authorization files. It was then difficult to refuse despite the threat of litigation from some companies. The agencies were caught in the crossfire. As a result, the implementing regulation on application for authorization of GMOs was changed. And I quote, the guarantee of quality studies supported in a transparent manner required that they be carried out on the basis of appropriate quality assurance systems and that the raw data be provided in all cases and in an adequate electronic form. This is the result of the Seralini affair. Although not the central issue in this case, the question of access to raw data, which is a sine qua non for the reproducibility of a study, was therefore put on the table at this occasion. This development then spread to other sectors, thus removing the obstacle of data confidentiality. However, and I said it in the introduction, there are still some areas that are not subject to the obligation to disclose this data, thus effectively preventing any reproducibility. For example, in the case for medicinal products, especially human drugs, and it's also the case for chemical substances. These texts are limited to the requirements to transmit summaries or results of studies, as the raw data may be subject to business confidentiality, which is explained by the commercial stake that such data may entail in these sectors. For drugs, for example, the protection of this data is a business issue because the same study can be used in different files, unlike study on GMOs. This is the case when the study of an originator drug is reused in a market authorization file for a generic. This is why market authorization is also used by pharmaceutical companies as a kind of administrative protection, which in reality is nothing more than another name for business secrecy. But public pressure on access to this data has increased considerably over the last 10 years. I think that things could evolve under this pressure. Notwithstanding that these sectors, it appears from a more global perspective that transparency is progressing at the expense of confidentiality. And the Seralini affair has played, according to me, a significant role in this evolution. This transparency should, one can imagine, facilitate the replicability of studies since it removes a legal obstacle. But does this mean that it will help overcome the crisis of replicability in regulatory science? I don't think so, because this crisis is more complex, and it seems to me, as Eva Barluzus said yesterday, that there is not a purely mechanical fix for this crisis. It's even possible that lifting confidentiality without reorganizing all of the system will have the opposite effect to what was expected. And its second part, from transparency to mistrust, a risk of flashback. So I have an example, concrete example. Sometimes an action does not have the desired effect. In a fire, for example, firefighters may try to open a window to evacuate the smoke and cause an explosion because the ventilation allows an oxygen supply that causes chemical reactions that is deadly to the firefighter involved. This is called flashback. So think before opening a window during a fire. Are there a risk of flashback with transparency? Even if all the data from the study are legally accessible, two problems remain. Firstly, the impossibility of reproducing the study because of the financial cost. Secondly, the risk of perverse effect of transparency. With regard to the cost of the study, this is an obvious obstacle to reproducibility. Consequently, if no actor is in a position to finance the reproduction of studies, we are inevitably led back to the initial problem of thirst. If no one is able to reproduce the study, then the public must trust the system, even as he discovers a huge asymmetry of information. In this regard, It's important to note that laboratories are regularly monitored to ensure compliance with good laboratory practice. In practice, however, cases of fraud have been detected. Most often, these were studies conducted abroad, suggesting that states are likely to engage in regulatory dumping by controlling laboratories less in order to attract companies wishing to conduct clinical toxicological or ecotoxicological studies on their territory. Companies have an interest in choosing the most flexible state to conduct their studies, because if they don't, competitors will do so anyway, and they will be less competitive. States are therefore encouraged to relax their regulation, and companies are encouraged to seek the most flexible regulation. However, this is very important, regulatory authorities such as the EMA or the ANSM can ensure, particularly during inspections, the quality of data concerning the studies conducted. The question is then whether inspections are sufficiently common and demanding abroad so that national and European authorities have precise data on the number of sites, investigators, patients, and the quality of data collected, and to combat fraud. This is one of my current areas of research, and my thinking continues to evolve, of course. But one of my hypotheses is that by dint of tinkering with the system, by adding level of controls rather than reorganizing all of the system, we are increasing in complexity without being certain of the real effectiveness, because the industry which want to fraud are systematically looking for new loopholes. I therefore continue to think that instead of this escalation of complexity, we could try to think of fraud as a systemic problem, and imagine a new legal organization of evaluation in which the actors involved in producing the evaluation would have no interest in defrauding. In other words, we could try to deal with the causes of the problem instead of the consequences. For as long as the interest in defrauding remains, distrust seems logical in spite of the control, the sophistication of the system, and the development of transparency. Not to mention that, and this is my last point, very short, transparency can also produce perverse effects, especially for the market. By having access to the data contained in a market authorization file, it's quite possible for a competitor to develop another interpretation of the data in the order to discredit the product safety study. Let us return for a moment to the Seralini case, for example, in which the interpretation of the study was a central issue. In this regard, it should be noted that this study was funded by the Coalition for Environmentally Responsible Economics, an association created by Auchan, which has a marketing strategy focused on the promotion of GMO-free private lab products. In an article entitled Le fondateur d'Auchan traque les risques des OGM, published by L'Express in 2008, I think, 2 years before the study conducted by the biologist, it was announced that this association planned to launch, and I quote, to launch an independent study on the impact of the consumption of GMO on human health. The association finally financed the CRIGEN for the realization and the publication of the study, whose conclusion affirming that GMOs are toxic. Okay. The commercial repercussions were terrible. The turnover related to products without GMO knew a jump to the detriment of products with GMOs. These examples confirm that the interpretation of data from a study can have serious consequences on the market, even if it's wrong. How can we ensure, if we make all the data accessible, that company will not use it to enter into a war of interpretation of the data aimed to harming competing products? For all these reasons, it's my conclusion, transparency, although indispensable to the replicability of studies, does not seem to be a sufficient lever on its own to overcome the crisis of replicability. Worse, it risks aggravating certain problems instead of solving them. How can we get out of this entropic loop? How to make regulatory science studies more reliable and less attackable? This is the central issue. From this point of view, the problem of data confidentiality is only the tip of the iceberg. It's enough to consider the most visible part of the problem to correct the trajectory using transparency measures. And I continue to discuss about that with Hugh Desmond because I think this problem is very near from the problem of the competition and the maximization of the credit effects in the academic research. So according to me, we should now change course, not only for a better technical democracy, but also to maintain a good economic development. Imagine a new way of producing these health and environmental assessments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tristan.